Wait!
Will you quit it?
What?
I'm trying to swim here. What, the ocean isn't big enough for you or something like that?
Huh?
You got a problem, buddy? Huh? Do you? Want a piece of me?
Man, the media portrays such reductive stereotypes. Like how ADHD is always represented by someone who can't sit still, always loses things, forgets what they're doing, and is so loud and obnoxious. Where did I put the computer? What am I talking about? Okay, so maybe they're onto something, but still, it's never felt right. And in this video, I'm gonna explore how neurodivergency is represented in the media. Thank you to the Pasta Partners for sponsoring a portion of this video. So I was trying to figure out where to start with all of this, and of course my first instinct was none other than TikTok. During the pandemic, TikTok really blew up, and with it, neurodivergent TikTok. Hey Jason, maybe you want to explain what neurodivergency is? You know, for those of us in the back? Oh, yeah. The recognition of natural variations in cognitive functioning and development, cognitive, your brain, known as neurodivergency, values distinctions in behavior, learning, and communication. Yeah, I didn't like that definition. Here's another one. Neurodivergency is the notion that conditions like autism, dyslexia, and ADHD should be regarded as naturally occurring cognitive variations. Think that clears it up? Neurodivergency is a non-medical term but often applies to neurodevelopmental conditions, which the medical model classifies as defects and disorders and society deems as disabilities. So basically, neurodivergent TikTok just means the side of TikTok where everyone's talking about their ADHD and their autism and how silly their brains are. It was really interesting to me how big it got, because it was one of the first times that I really saw peer-to-peer representation of people's mental and cognitive dysfunction. When I was growing up, I didn't have a lot of representation. I have ADHD and autism, but we'll talk about that later. There was no one on screen that had ADHD and talked about it. It was exactly what Dory does. It was loud, obnoxious, and just reductive overall. And so I really wanted to take a look and to see the history of how neurodivergency was represented in media. So with this question in mind, I started researching about different examples of neurodivergent representation in the media. I explored some blog posts, videos, and articles in attempts to find a general consensus on the topic. I figured people who'd been frustrated by the negative portrayals, like I have, would have gotten on their internet soapbox at some point. But then arose the reality, that is, people like me have a hard time finishing projects. So I decided to talk with some members of the neurodivergent community in search of their opinions and some examples they could provide. So, Mark, how have you seen ADHD and neurodivergency in general represented in media?
Well, I've been watching Doctor Who since I was a little kid, and it was always like the doctor was like me.
How so?
He's always running around like I was as a kid, and people always be like, Mark, you gotta slow down, and people were always like, Mark, you're stupid. Except the doctor runs around, and he's not stupid. So we could always jump in from one thing to the next.
Yeah.
But he was also like the hero of the day.
Did it make you feel seen at all as a kid?
It did, because David Tennant, one of the actors who plays the doctor, he felt the same way, because in his one interview, he was all like, I got to be the hero, even though, like, he was like me, you know? Yeah, and also, they bring it up a lot in the show.
That he has ADHD?
That he has ADHD. So Donna goes, if you look up ADHD in the encyclopedia, there's a picture of him right there. Yeah.
Do you have any opinions about how neurodivergency, like ADHD and autism and stuff like that, and dyslexia have been represented in the media?
Do I have an opinion?
Or what are your thoughts on it?
There was a stigma. It was, we were stupid. We were retarded.
Yeah.
Sorry, I know that you don't like that word, but...
I mean, it's what people said and used. And do you think that there have been harmful stereotyped, like, in the realm of neurodivergence, and like autism and ADHD and just learning disabilities and stuff, in specifically the attempt at representation in media?
Oh, can B say something? This is
Of
for
course you can.
Writing. Okay, because he was putting up a note for me.
I'm not going to go deep. What I found is that there is no right answer for any of these hard subjects. And I think that we're always seeking the right balance that's never achieved. So in other words, it goes way to one side and then swings back the other side. Trying to find the right amount of attention to those things that you mentioned, but sometimes you go way too far, and then sometimes it goes not far enough.
After hearing some personal opinions, I kept searching for more examples and analysis. Some people think that film and TV have long failed to depict neurodivergent characters accurately, and other people think that the representation that does exist plays into stereotypes that are harmful to the community. And then again, others seem to like some of their portrayals that they've seen. Like, I've liked some of them. Let's look at some examples. I mean, if you think about it, tons of shows have been able to portray characters in a range of ways. Like, some characters are kind of reductive, like Forrest Gump.
Forrest Gump. Just a local idiot. And can you believe it? I got to go to college too.
Me too, Forrest. Some characters are like superheroes because of their neurodivergency, like Sherlock.
For my take, rooted in action, but rooted in action, sometimes I kind of sound nowhere around.
The Good Doctor. It's totally how I see the world. Others are just kind of seen as outcasts. Personal favorite, Community.
I see your value now. It's a callback to when we met first season, and me calling you your seasons is a callback to my first season dialogue. And me calling
Abed, I know what makes you off-putting, but why are you here? You're programming now, Abed? You quit.
creative differences.
Okay, Dason. But I hear you asking, Dason, what does this all mean? Well, I'm here to answer your questions. Basically, media has had a really difficult time portraying neurodivergent characters. Like, early representation of neurodiversity usually emphasize certain traits, right? Like the ability to hyperfocus or their hyperobservancy. The ability to pattern recognize has been extrapolated upon and kind of made like this superpower. Things like The Good Doctor or Sherlock or even things like Psyched. And this risks this kind of savant stereotype, or the nonverbal mystery. Often the neurodivergent character would be portrayed as a puzzle for the neurotypical protagonist to solve. And the common stereotype of this odd one out trope often focuses too much on how someone's neurodiversity affects those around them and not themselves. The scenarios that are in a lot of these pieces of media result in the neurotypical characters gaining something or growing from having to interact with the neurodiverse characters, when the neurodiverse characters just remain a mystery to be reckoned with. But that's not to say that that's not kind of how it is, you know? Neurodiversity is kind of like being the odd one out, and we do have a lot of cool brain abilities. Sometimes we do feel kind of like we have superpowers with the way that we can see the world, but it can be a harmful representation when that's all you're painted as. But why is it harmful? Why does that representation matter? Let's figure it out. I think that when you struggle with things in your personal life, something that is really helpful is when you can see yourself in media in a more positive light. But if you're not given that, it can be hard to feel right or okay or just like valid.
Yeah, I remember I asked you one time why you liked labeling and why you searched out. And you said because it made you feel better, it made you feel accepted, that there were other people out there that had the same issues, the same thoughts.
Hold it right there, Deborah. I think she's on to something. People are being identified and identifying themselves as neurodivergent, and they're learning about their paths and their brains in a way that wasn't accessible to people 2 decades ago. As I stated earlier, during the pandemic, TikTok blew up, and neurodivergent TikTok blew up with it. And what that did for a lot of people was life-changing. It introduced people to the more nuanced experiences of neurodiverse people. Because I could just take my phone, make a little TikTok about my struggle to do this whole report project, and then millions of people could instantly see it and immediately relate to that struggle. And it allowed for people who didn't have official diagnoses or character dialogue that didn't have to go through filters and filters of writers' rooms to be heard and be seen by a lot of people. People found this community on TikTok and realized that they weren't alone. Other people felt like this. They shared a language to understand my experiences, the language of neurodiversity. More importantly, this community provided ways to help people navigate the world, especially those who didn't have an official piece of paper diagnosing them and validating their lifetime of quirks, talents, and struggles. This was a community with a wealth of information, and it's at your fingertips. It was increasingly personalized, and every additional second that you scrolled, you found something new. TikTok helped me realize I was autistic. I had gotten my ADHD diagnosis in 3rd grade because both my parents had it. It was very obvious. But I didn't know that I was autistic until like a year ago. And it has massively changed the way that I see the world and the way that I see myself. I have more ways and abilities to cope with things that I struggle with because I'm now given language and words to talk about them. And I also get to see other people who experience similar things as me. Representation in media is important because it provides another way to get to know yourself, to understand what's going on in your head without professional health resources, which things like the DSM-5 often lack the nuance that a portrayal of a character or a TikTok has. For example, behavioral research like research for autism prominently relies on male samples of Western, educated, industrialized, rich, democratic societies. Needless to say, it's unsurprising that countless individuals are realizing their diagnosis because they didn't fit that male blah 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 model, but now they have access to this information and can see themselves elsewhere. And the media is improving too. Not all examples are bad and reductive and evil. I mean, for one thing, in recent years, society's understanding of neurodivergency has deepened, which means that now characters are often depicted as highly driven or they have unique perspectives. The neurodivergent community is taking back its representation, often through the use of headcanons. Headcanon is a word used in the film, television, and comics fandoms that refers to something a fan imagines about a character, such as a scenario or relationship, but that does not appear on screen or on the page. Or personal retcons. Retcon in a film, television series, or other fictional work is a piece of new information that imposes a different interpretation on previously described events, typically used to facilitate a dramatic plot shift or account for an inconsistency, or to make people neurospicy, which allow individuals to reinterpret these stories and characters as neurodivergent, even if they weren't explicitly portrayed that way originally. Even the term neurodivergency in itself encourages a more respectful approach to representation. It breaks this stigma around brains that are different, like the idea that autism is just a disease that needs to be cured. It's amazing what real people on screen can do for a society. And there's been a lot of progress, notably, but there still remains a need for continued vigilance in avoiding stereotypes and promoting more authentic and respectful representations. Thank you. Want to do one more take?
Free Palestine.